All right, let's go back to our Anatomage table and look at some of these major arteries of the head and neck. So remember again, if we're coming out the left side of the heart, remember the left side of the heart, the left ventricle is what pumps blood to almost all parts of the body. Except for the lungs, it's pumping blood from the top of your head to the tip of your toes. Now once you come up off that aorta, well, remember the very first branch coming off that aortic arch is the Brachiocephalic artery. And coming off that Brachiocephalic artery is going to be your right common carotid. Remember, the left common carotid is the second branch coming off the aortic arch. So again, if you want to come up towards the head and neck, again, we go back to the heart, right? We can start with the aorta. But then again, if we want to look at the right side of the neck, we'd have to look at the Brachiocephalic artery, which leads up to the right common carotid. And again, left common carotid is another branch off that aortic arch. It's the second one in the middle. But let's say we follow up this right common carotid artery. It's going to come up just about to the angle of your mandible, where it turns and bends, and it's going to split into internal and external carotids. So again, on the right side, we got right common carotid, and then it splits and branches into a right external and into a right internal. And of course, you got the same thing over on the left side. Left common carotid, left external, left internal. So where those common carotids come up and split, there's a bit of a thick spot, especially over here on the right side or whatever. We get a little bit more blood flow to the right than we do the left, not much more. But if you look where that common carotid comes up, just below, just inferior to the angle of the mandible, there's a thick spot called the carotid sinus. Very good place to check someone's pulse, because it's a big artery and it's close to the heart. Should be able to find a pulse there at all times if somebody has one. So if we come up again, up either one of these common carotids, coming up your neck, just before you get to the angle of the mandible, they're going to split into your external and your internal. External carotids take blood to everything that's superficial around the brain. Think like the skull and the skin and the muscle in between them. Internal carotids are going to go towards the brain. You look at the bottom of the skull, there's two large holes, among many others, called the internal carotid, the carotid canals. The internal carotid arteries are what go through those. So again, you got common splitting into external and internal. We'll look at some of the others. They point out the vertebral arteries. Remember, if you look at your cervical vertebrae, they're the only vertebrae that in the transverse processes have holes or foramen. Well, through those transverse foramen are where the vertebral arteries run, on the right side and the left. There's a right and left vertebral artery. There we got both of them shown right here. Where those come up, they converge and come together into the basilar artery. And the basilar artery is a rear posterior large inflow into that cerebral arterial circle, also called the circle of Willis. And from that circle, you got many large arteries going out to many different parts of the brain. But look at some of the others up here. We got the occipital arteries. Remember, the occipital bone is very rear to the back, posterior. Also comes up under the skull. We got that large foramen magnum running through it, where your brain stem meets your spinal cord. Here we have maxillary arteries. Of course, your maxilla is your upper jaw. We got our temporal bone on the side of the head, left and right. So we got temporal arteries there. To the face, you can see some facial arteries. So those are just some of the larger, more visible arteries you see coming up to head and neck. So there's a good view of those. We'll continue with others very soon.